If you're a Sony fan, it's hard for you right now to deny that Sony did not have the best week this last week. There was a really mediocre showing at their PlayStation showcase, at least according to a lot of fans. And that was followed up by Naughty Dog announcing a delay for The Last of Us Factions Part 2, which has been one of the most anticipated multiplayer titles for Sony fans. So the question is Sony in trouble? Because aside from some live service games with no set release dates, all we saw from the showcase was Spider-Man. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, I'm Little Bobby here with 5-9 Gaming Direct, and today we're going to be talking about Sony and their future, because right now it is not looking too hot. It's looking like a lot of their big plans that they had involving live service games is going by the wayside. But before we really get into the news and everything that happened in the last week, remember, if you're brand new here, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell, and make sure if you enjoy this video, you slap a like. And if you do not enjoy this video, hit the dislike button and let us know why in the comments you didn't enjoy it and what we can do to improve in the future. All right, so Sony had a showcase this last week. It was a big one after about 2 years almost of waiting. PlayStation owners, we're finally going to get a glimpse into what is next for Sony as a brand. We're going to see, hopefully, some of these big titles, The Last of Us Factions 2. Obviously, we're going to see Spider-Man. People were hopeful for new PC ports, such as the Ghost of Tsushima PC port or Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart coming to PC. Because even after the launch of the disaster that was The Last of Us PC, it's really hard to deny that Sony's IPs have pull in the industry. And people still get excited, especially those people who saw Ghost of Tsushima and were like, well, I'm not going to buy a PlayStation for it, but when they release it to PC, I'm going to be all over that. And I know Talon was hoping personally for Ghost of Tsushima 2 news, or something like the return of Sly Cooper or Infamous ports, right? Bring those up as remasters to PS5. So it's hard to deny that expectations were very, very high for this showcase. And it turned out that there really wasn't a lot of Sony first-party stuff. The showcase opened up with Fair Games from Jade Raymond's Haven Studio, and that's going to be a competitive heist game. It looks like a cyberpunk Robin Hood PvP number where you compete against others to see who can get the most riches, right? It's likely an extraction shooter, because those are something that is getting really big in the competitive space right now. And that's almost certainly going to be a live service game. With how it looked like those are going to be some generic characters that you're going to be able to customize, and you're probably going to pay money to do it. From there, we got a lot of big third-party reveals. Some of them were really cool. Some of them were indie games as well that I'm really looking forward to personally. Talos Principle 2, because the first one was awesome. The Plucky Squire is going to be one of my top games this year. I can already tell just by the art style and how the gameplay looks so far. But then we also got some bigger numbers, like the reveal of Phantom Blade Zero, which has been the talk of the show, and something that a lot of people who are probably fans of Ghost of Tsushima are going to really enjoy. It looks like a very dark, kind of gritty version of that game, with a lot on the line story-wise, as the prompt of the story is, if you had 66 days to live, what would you do? But then we also got things like Assassin's Creed Mirage, which I'm very much looking forward to as a fan of the old Assassin's Creed franchise before Origins. I love the classic Assassin's Creed, and that return to form for Ubisoft is hopefully going to be the thing that helps them kind of turn around, because they have had a hard time lately as well. And I thought it was really funny that those two games are the stars of the show outside of the first party. But one other reveal that wasn't quite a surprise was Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, which we all know is going to be a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3. They said they dropped the 3 and added Delta because Delta is kind of the symbol for, hey, things are changing, but we're not fundamentally changing anything that is core to the experience. And I think that's important with the Metal Gear franchise. You don't want to change that experience that so many people have grown fond of over the years. We also saw Dragon's Dogma 2 as another not so surprise. I had at least heard rumors of that for quite a while. We knew it was coming eventually, and we got to see some initial gameplay. We also saw Bungie announcing their first new IP in almost 10 years with Marathon. Now, this is a quote-unquote new IP, even though it's kind of a reboot of an old IP. Marathon is an old series of first-person shooter games that Bungie made before Halo, and fans of old-school first-person shooters will remember that series fondly. Bungie has since released a Vidoc and basically said that yes, this one definitely is an extraction shooter that's going to be coming out on all consoles, because that's part of their agreement with Sony, that they will be able to release anywhere and everywhere. Finally, there was the reveal of gameplay for Spider-Man 2. It was about 12 minutes, and I personally thought it looked fantastic. I am super excited. I love Spider-Man. I love Miles Morales, just the games and the characters. Peter Parker and Miles Morales, two of my favorite heroes, and I absolutely adore the first two games in this series. I am absolutely looking forward to this third game, and it's looking absolutely phenomenal so far. The things like the animations for the symbiote suit, if you watch the video that me and Talon put out the other day, we talked all about this. It was like a half-hour video. We went all about it. About 15 minutes of it was dedicated to just Spider-Man and how cool that trailer looked. But here's the thing about this. A lot of this was cool, but it wasn't what we were expecting. A lot of people were expecting more first-party Sony stuff, because after almost 2 years, you're thinking Sony's been kind of sandbagging. They've been kind of going, hey, we're just gonna kind of push this to later, and then boom, kick it off, right? Well, they didn't do that. They kind of just gave a good showcase, but not a good Sony showcase, is what a lot of people are saying. And I think that's important to take into account for them, because now they're realizing, oh, maybe we should have shown more, because now people are starting to kind of lose confidence in the brand. At least I've seen a number of people lose confidence in the brand in this last week. Now, following that, Naughty Dog put out a press release just yesterday. They released this on Twitter that says, "The Last of Us fans, we know many of you have been looking forward to hearing more about our Last of Us multiplayer game. We're incredibly proud of the job that our studio has done thus far, but as development has continued, we've realized that what is best for the game is to give it more time. Our team will continue to work on the project, as well as other games in development, including a brand new single-player experience. We look forward to sharing more soon. We're grateful to our fantastic community for your support. Thank you for your passion for our games. It continues to drive us." Now, that really is nice, and it's kind of good that they're being upfront, but the reason they put that out is because Jason Schreier, who is fantastic games journalist, one of the best in the industry, put out an article saying that The Last of Us multiplayer Factions 2, as we'll call it, has been having a lot of trouble. And the gist of the article is that Sony brought in Bungie, who Bungie is the kind of kings of live service when it comes to Sony and Sony studios. Destiny 2 has 150,000 players on at any given time during, a normal populated day. And Sony came in and looked at The Last of Us Factions 2 and said that they did not feel like it would promote long-term engagement and player retention, right? And that's one of the things that Destiny has struggled with, and it struggled with a ton, and it took them years to really work it out. Destiny, just like every other live service game, is had to have cycles where the player count goes up and down. But recently, after Destiny 2 has been out, it is entering its 6th year. It recently got its highest player count since the launch of Destiny 2, which is crazy. So they kind of know what they're talking about when it comes to player engagement and retention. They have a great track record after, of course, Curse of Osiris, where they full open admitted that, hey, our game almost completely failed. They say now that we have the right stuff to keep players engaged, and they are constantly changing things and finding new ways to drive player retention, which is incredibly important in the live service gaming sector, because that is what makes money. When you keep players in, you keep them engaged, and you go, hey, we have these cool modes, we're making new things, we're making cool stuff happen. Every time you log in, you're going to see something a little different, and while you're here, hey, maybe you want to buy this cool gun skin, or this cool shirt for your character, or this cool, hairstyle, or a hat, or whatever you're doing. It depends on how it's being monetized, right? Fortnite will monetize with full skins. You can dress up like Goku from Dragon Ball Z, or Spider-Man, or you can dress up like Ariana Grande or Travis Scott. And if you're playing The Division 2, you can buy like a teal hat with a unicorn on it, or you can buy charms for your backpack with novelty characters on them. Bungie's done a great job monetizing Destiny 2, and they are a very profitable company. And now with Marathon on its way, they're going to have a real PvP competitive multiplayer shooter that they're going to be focusing on, as well as a very PvE heavy Destiny 2. So they're going to be catering to all types of players, and that's why Sony brought them in to talk with Naughty Dog and review Factions Part 2. Now, Factions is still going very, very strong. I personally don't see how player retention and engagement would be a huge factor with how Factions work. I played Factions on the PS4 Last of Us Remake not too long ago, I would say a few months ago, and it took me about a minute and a half to find a game. That game is almost a decade old, and there are enough players that I can be matched in faster times than something like Overwatch or Destiny 2, depending on what time of day I'm playing. But it's been announced now that Naughty Dog is taking people off and scaling back the project due to the conversations that were had with Sony and Bungie. And that's a real shame because Naughty Dog has invested years into this. This was supposed to come out with The Last of Us 2. And now we're seeing a live service that may never see the light of day by one of the most prestigious studios in the world. That is very troubling because Sony is going all in on live service, right? They said they're going to be putting about 60% of their budget to live service in the next few years, which can be concerning because think about how much money they might have spent on factions already. If they've spent all this money on this and they're willing to go, you know what? We don't like how this looks. We're not going to deal with it. We're not going to put it out. What happens when the next one doesn't meet the high quality standard that Sony sets? Live services come out all the time. They also fail all the time. And if Sony's betting this much money and they're not going to release it, that could be very, very problematic because they don't have Microsoft money. Microsoft, the benefit of what they are doing is that they have money to just throw away. Sony does not have that money. They cannot just throw away money the same way that Microsoft can. And Microsoft also doesn't have the reputation that Sony has. So that's the thing that Sony's likely also thinking about as well. Imagine if The Last of Us Factions comes out and it ends up kind of in the same wheelhouse as Halo Infinite, where you go, you know what? This is really fun, but a lot has changed in the 10 years since Factions, right? Fortnite has become big. Battle passes are huge. We need new seasons with every live service with new themes to them, right? And different things need to happen in the game. Otherwise, players get bored, they check out, they don't come back, and they don't spend money, which is what keeps the live service game going. So if Sony's putting 50% or 60% of their time and energy into these live services, which they said that they're planning on doing up until, I believe, 2025, then that's going to be problematic because they're possibly just going to burn a ton of money. One of the things that Sony does not do is put out games that may harm their reputation as a game publisher, which is great. It really is, because that's why Sony has the reputation that they do. There is a quality bar that you expect with a Sony title, especially a Sony first-party title. If you see Sony Entertainment on a title, you can bet that it's gonna be a pretty solid game. Maybe not the best game you've ever played, but it's definitely gonna be a quality game. You're not gonna see Sony Interactive Entertainment Presents and then get something like Redfall or, heaven forbid, Gollum, if you've been keeping up on that fiasco. Sony has this minimum quality standard that they adhere to, and they will cancel things. They are not afraid to do that. And right now, a lot of people are afraid that it's sounding like The Last of Us Factions 2 is looking to get canceled. And me personally, I would hate that. I love The Last of Us 2, and Factions. And I've been looking forward to Factions Part 2 for years. I would hate to see Sony throw all of that away, especially if there's a chance that they could get it to work. Them saying they're scaling back is very concerning. And the further we go with this, the more and more live services that we start to see from them, the more and more possibility comes up that, hey, this is not really meeting the quality bar. Let's shut it down. Well, we wasted $50 million on that project, which means we're going to have to pull back from this project. Then that next project has less of a budget, can't deliver the quality, right? This could snowball very, very quickly against Sony. And I really hope they're considering that, because this live servicing has been a concern for the people who are tapped in for a long time. A lot of people have been like, live services are cool if you get them right. And I can think of maybe a handful of games that have really got live service right to the point where players are like, generally, I'm happy. That doesn't mean that nobody's going to complain, however. Look at the Pokemon community. The fact that Scarlet and Violet are the top-selling games for Nintendo under the Pokemon license of all time, and everyone complained about how broken they are, how bad they look, and all that stuff. And that happens every time a new Pokemon game comes out. I will say that it is very exciting that Naughty Dog is working on a new single-player experience, and I never mind Sony continuing to put out those big single-player games. However, we also know that since Microsoft announced they were going to be trying to purchase Activision Blizzard King, that Sony has been worried that they need something to make sure that they have that revenue that they're going to lose from Call of Duty. Because no matter what way you spin it, in 10 years, it's very likely Microsoft is going to go, hey, you know what? You can only get Call of Duty on Xbox. And if in 10 years, heaven forbid, people are still buying Call of Duty, that is going to be a huge blow to Sony and PlayStation if they don't have their own live services or big franchises to compete with that. Microsoft knows that, and that's exactly why they're buying Activision Blizzard King. My main worry, though, is that Sony has a lot of good IPs and good franchises that they could bring back to challenge Call of Duty. Resistance was a fantastic franchise. Resistance 2 is one of my absolute favorite games from the PS3 era. I remember playing that with one of my buddies for hours and hours a day. Just the co-op modes, it was so much fun. Killzone could also be a heavy hitter if Sony invested in it and put some of these great first-person studio shooters that they've picked up on it. And I think that's the route they need to go over this live service thing. Yes, live service can generate tons of money, but they've already got Bungie with Destiny and Marathon. Those are going to be two of the biggest live service games on the planet, especially considering that the CGI Marathon trailer racked up more views than the Spider-Man gameplay review in 24 hours. After 24 hours, Marathon was sitting at 13 million and Spider-Man was sitting at 12, which is pretty crazy. Bungie making a competitive first-person shooter is huge news, and that's going to be a huge game, especially considering Microsoft, PC, and PlayStation are all going to have access to it. That's going to be a big cash draw for Sony. If they can, one of the things that they need to do is really focus up, look forward. And this is the same thing I've been saying about Xbox, because Xbox has had a lot of missteps, but remember, they can afford to do that because they're owned by Microsoft, who has infinite money hacks. But Sony needs to reassess, and they need to do it quickly. If these first few live service games don't land, or let's say 1 out of 4 lands in the next 2 years, they need to kind of be happy with that, keep it going, support that one as robustly as possible, and then try and get these other FPS studios that they've acquired recently on some serialized titles. Having something like Titanfall or Call of Duty is going to be monumental. If they can get Killzone or Resistance into this new gaming landscape and make it something that they can move forward. Another one I've seen is SOCOM, but I don't feel like that's really a big thing, and it's not going to be received as well as something in the first-person shooter realm. And honestly, I think that Killzone would be the thing that, if they did it right, would be the kind of Call of Duty challenger, right? Not only would that challenge Call of Duty, but it would challenge Halo. It's that sci-fi shooter, and it could be a fast-paced and fun arcadey shooter similar to Call of Duty. Another thing they could do is look at how X-Defiant does, and if X-Defiant really does well, they could consider trying to go for marketing rights with them to make sure that people know, quote-unquote, the best place to play is PlayStation, right? That's always what the marketing says. But right now, with all this news and with the studio shutdowns in the last few weeks, Naughty Dog possibly shuttering Factions 2, the kind of lackluster showcase that didn't really show a lot of the first-party stuff we were hoping to see, we got to be worried here. Sony, with just a few missteps, could cause a lot of trouble for themselves, and they have had a great track record. So personally, I'm hoping they can just kind of pull out of it. Right now, it's looking like they're starting to hit a nosedive, but I'm hoping that they can pull out of it and really center and focus up and give PlayStation fans who want big first-party games, and sure, we want third-party and we want shooters and live service stuff too, right? But after having put 4 years of time and money into Factions 2, and now seeing that there's a very real possibility that the project itself is not even going to come out due to that quality bar that they have, Sony has a choice to make. They can go, hey, we need to pivot away from this live service thing because it's going to just cost us a ton of money with very little possibility for return. I would say 1 out of 20 live service games survives and does okay for itself. And if they're putting out 20, that means one of them's going to do it, right? But that's worrying as a PlayStation fan and as someone who wants to see these game companies give us the best possible stuff. As much as I've railed on Xbox, that's always been my thing with them too, is I want them to give us the best possible stuff. And when they don't, it's disappointing. And I don't want that from Sony as well, because then all I've got is Nintendo and I got to play everything on a Switch. And I don't think anybody wants that, especially talent. All right, what do you guys think? Are you guys worried about Sony like I am? They've definitely had a hard week, and I'm hoping that in the next month or two, especially with Summer Games Fest coming up, we can see them throw out more stuff and go, hey, you know what, we had more stuff and we wanted to make sure we had something to present here at Summer Games Fest. Here's a couple of really cool games that you're going to see from our first party. If they did that, I think a lot would be forgiven really, really quickly. But please let us know down in the comments what you think. Are you worried about them? Do you think they're just going to be fine? Do you want Sony focusing on more multiplayer and live service games, or do you want them to keep putting out the first-party single-player bangers that they have been? Both sides are valid, so if you have an opinion, let us know down in the comments below. Once again, I'm Little Bobby here with 5-9 Gaming Direct. If you made it this far, consider hitting that subscribe button and leave a like. And if you didn't like this video, leave a dislike. Let us know why down in the comments below. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope we see you soon.